facility, and it's actually in the middle of a forest inside Riga. And it's built there sort of like in the old days when you didn't have any stabilizers for video cameras, then they needed to get away from like all the vibration from traffic. So, and that's why this whole facility was built literally in the middle of a forest to just get away from all the vibration. So it's a really cool place for us to have an office. So we have a recording studio in office, and we sometimes make a lot of noise. And then when we need to make some accurate recordings or using mics, or very sensitive mics, then we don't get distracted by some other noises coming from outside. So it's a perfect place for an audio startup.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would expect a Sonarworks headquarters to have good acoustics or something, because, I mean, that is what you do. So that
Yeah. We have paid attention to that.
Yeah, I would hope so. I know that there can be some real money for a lot of corporate offices investing in acoustic treatment, whether it's for security and privacy from people hearing outside conference rooms or just like street traffic in general. I have a friend who's an acoustician, and he's made a pretty good career just doing that specifically for corporate buildings in New York City.
Yeah. And our biggest distractor is that if we open windows, we actually hear birds singing. So that's the biggest kind of noise pollution we have.
Hey, that's not a bad kind of pollution. You could sample them. Honestly, I would. I used to live in an apartment where there were hundreds of geese. I don't know if you have geese in Latvia, but just the worst kind of sound of bird you could ever imagine. And they're like probably 8-pound, 9-pound birds, and they just honk. They sound like really bad bike horns.
Yeah.
And they're so insanely loud, and they're fighting and mating. And every podcast episode, I'd have to work extra hard just to edit them out. It was a real struggle for like 2 years of my life.
I actually, that when you say this, it reminds me of San Diego. I used to like be in San Diego, and then living like by the ocean. And then there were these parrots making noises. And at least, I don't know, over here in the north, we have relatively melodic birds like all around. Like generally, I don't think there is any bird out there that we have that I would call non-melodic. But then parrots were like completely just like random, really irritating noise. So
yeah, they're loud. I know they're loud. I know somebody who has a parrot. But anyway, we could keep talking about birds, but I would love to pick your brain and talk more about your experience with Sonarworks and the company. And you've been interviewed and published in a lot of articles with Entrepreneur and Music Tech, Music Radar, European Business Review. And it seems like you've been investing more with the Sound ID, vocal or voice AI, and more just AI products in general. So you've done a lot of research around that. So I'd love to talk to you about that as well. For people who don't really know you, you founded Sonarworks in 2012 in Latvia. From what I understand, you didn't have any kind of engineering background at that time, but eventually worked with engineers in Los Angeles to create calibration technology, solving a lot of acoustic issues in studios, professional high-end studios, as well as home studios. That's the Sound ID reference product, which a lot of people know today. It's been used by hundreds of thousands of professional studios for speaker and headphone calibration in over 170 countries now. Sound ID, I have your reference microphone. I have the Atom Audio A8 speakers that they sent me, which I really love because typically you have like a standalone application for your Sound ID reference and a plugin for the DAW. But I like these speakers because you can actually run the calibration in the speakers themselves rather than downloading. So it's cool that you guys have kind of bridged that gap as well as working with speaker companies and installing the calibration in the speakers themselves, as well as having the software. So there's a lot of flexibility there, which is really cool. I've also played around with the voice AI as of recently. I'm sure, or vocal AI product. I'm sure you guys will continue to develop that. That's pretty new. What's your experience in the headphone calibration industry? Like, what made you want to get into that in the first place?
thanks, Dan, for having me. So I'm lately been doing more and more of these interviews, which is a new thing for me. I'm actually not a sort of media first kind of person. Yeah, as you did a pretty good intro. So we did launch a new AI product last year. And it's not like we have stopped doing the reference product line. It's really now the second leg for us in terms of a completely new product line. It does, though, drive on a lot of kind of technical background that we developed while working on reference, but it is a new product, and we actually do envision even maybe more products down the line that are going to be completely separate product lines. Yeah, coming back to the reference, so we started that off in 2012, so a bit more than 10 years already working on that product. We are technology first. We got finance initially by venture capital, and we attracted the kind of what they call deep tech venture capital investors, so that are completely focused on like technology. So, and that meant for us that we have always had a leg in research, and doing research means that you actually develop completely unique proprietary technologies, then you kind of productize them into product. But in essence, we still don't have any part in the like code that you could say that, hey, we just like took this ready made other product and just integrated it. So almost everything is done proprietary. Maybe the only exception is with AI. There are increasingly now kind of open source models that we are looking into and then productizing those, because doing fundamental level research on AI, that's sort of, you need really deep pockets for that. That's really costly. I think the AI area is like developing so quickly that you can't even catch up. If you just want to know all the like new stuff that's come out that kind of is even open source, it's going to take a lot of resources to just like be on top of what's actually being released. So there, I think, yes, it's more of productizing things. So as you mentioned on the reference side, we primarily focused on like really high-end studios, a lot of Grammy awarded engineers, producers. We probably are somewhere close to 100 by now. So we started off really there and then started gradually moving more towards simpler studio setups, and then ultimately bedroom studios and very, very basic setups. So I think we are still actually on that trajectory where we want to go more sort of mass market, if you will. But currently we haven't fully kind of been able to transition there. So we have a pretty large coverage still on the high end kind of studio. And that gives us access to quite a lot of, brightest and best minds that we have in the industry. So we do keep a very close relationship with all of them and then kind of try to communicate with them as much as possible. And that gives us sort of a feel for what's happening on the front line.
Yeah, no, that's a great like overview. I'm curious, you talked about expanding the market and your reach, specifically with the speaker or headphone calibration with your Sound ID reference. What do you think the future looks like in this market or the industry, say for the average producer or home bedroom audio engineer? I mean, there's so many options now to just mix and produce and make records at home. What do you think the future looks like for that market, specifically with acoustics or sound, or what you guys are doing?
Yeah, actually, we do a lot of strategizing internally in Sonarworks. That's kind of the way we are. We always try to look out for what's happening in the market. We try to look forward what's going to happen in the market. I think it was the last one that we did like at the beginning of 2025. We actually kind of try to look broader on what's happening in the industry. And then I made a slide that visually just depicts studios as you go through different decades, right? Like you start with like, I don't know, the first studios appeared like 30s or 40s, and then you have something in the 50s, 60s. So, and when you put this string of just images of how a studio looked like, there's, I think, one very obvious conclusion out of that is that you started off with extremely heavy hardware. Like these studios back in the day were extremely packed with bulky hardware. You immediately realize that probably cost a fortune. Like that's not anything that a simple user can afford. There are probably a few of those. And then if you were lucky and you were Beatles and you get access to all these kind of nice equipment, you could probably make decent recordings by what was a standard at that time. Now, as these images and as the decades progress, you see that first hardware gets miniaturized, and then a lot of these hardware pieces just disappear. A lot of hardware that we did have to have back in the day, you don't have to have anymore. A lot of that has been integrating. Let's say you can take a few hardware pieces from back in the day and it will be manifested today as a small piece of hardware, maybe on your table, but then still more and more hardware actually gets eradicated. So I think that trend line is actually going to continue. So I think everything is going to get simplified. You'll be able to make a decent recording with far less hardware than it used to be. So I think the studio of the future is much more simpler than what it used to be. And I would even say there will be a time where basically you will need something that's going to be a laptop at that time and basically your headphones, and that's it. And most of the other hardware is ultimately going to be eradicated, some of it by simple hardware innovation, some of it by technologies like AI. I mean, let's take a microphone for an instance. Like once you have full-fledged AI technology working on the microphone captured stream and the AI knows the target, you can have the target as a very specific fancy mic at some point. But in order to get to that output, you don't need the fancy mic anymore in the future. You can actually kind of get away with it. So, and that leads me to idea that ultimately you will be able to make like studio recordings using like your headphone mics somewhere down the line. I mean, it's not today, but and it's difficult to say whether it's 3 to 5 years, but I would say it's going to be the future studio is going to be still continuing on the trend of simplifying all the hardware, getting rid of the hardware. So it's going to be a smaller and smaller, easier and easier setup from a hardware point of view. And then the only thing that's kind of left, and then it's kind of battling against time in terms of sound reproduction. Nowadays, even with all the fancy technologies, if you want big sound, like you don't want near field monitoring, but you would want to get like into, somebody comes for a demo and you want to show a far field demo setup, you still need big speakers. And then the question is, I don't think that AI changes the physics of that, where you need big drivers to produce big sound, right? Like no AI is gonna put you like a big bass out of a really small Bluetooth speaker. So, but then the only thing that can be alter that is if you have like eventually direct human to brain interfaces. So then that gets rid of all the speakers as well. So the very far future, I guess you don't need anything anymore. It's just going to be, just your brain. And then in the short run, it's just going to get simpler and simpler. And I think that headphones and speakers, frankly, are last to go. They're probably going to stay the longest simply because of the physics of it. But then they will get challenged by human-to-brain interfaces. Probably if we would be talking 3 years ago or 5 years ago, I would think that's complete like fantasy. But then nowadays, human-to-brain, I mean, they just had the case where they brought back vision to a blind person using brain interfaces. So brain interfaces coming to the audio world, like definitely out there. I just can't say whether it's 3, 5, or 10 years, but that's the end of the line kind of final disruption. But probably there are bigger things to worry at that point.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. I totally agree with you. I was listening to a podcast the other day talking about brain interfaces. Right now, it's I believe in clinical trials. I can't remember the name of the company, but they are focusing on helping people who have, severe disabilities. And that's really the first phase. But I think eventually it will probably be more widely adopted and have more use cases just for entertainment purposes, I'm sure.
And I think we are actually... This is a really good sort of segueing into the AI world. And like not going into details, I believe what the AI world brings to the music industry, even right now, it's all going to be about efficiency. So AI is ultimately going to hugely impact overall efficiency. In very simple terms, it means an individual working in the field ultimately is going to be able to put out a lot more content than they did before. Like, 10x kind of factor more content. And then the brain interfaces, I think, play a role here because ultimately that unlocks probably a big factor of an improvement in terms of efficiency. Why? Because the brain interface speed is actually much faster than the other type of human activities, like let's say how you move your hand while clicking a mouse or how you communicate with somebody else. So brain interfaces just take it to the next level in terms of speed and efficiency. So, and that, I think that's still future down the road, but that's going to bring us, I think is going to be part of what we do. And that's going to be massively changing the whole kind of efficiency story. So yeah, but that's slightly looking out kind of into the more distant future.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as like, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years, realistically, what do you think what it's going to look like for producers or mixing engineers as far as calibration? Do you think it will be in one of those scenarios where you have something like Isotope, for example, has their mastering assistant where it can actually just listen to the mix and know from the output of your sound card, this is exactly how it should sound? And then maybe speaker calibration is not going to be as necessary because it's already going to sound good coming out.
So there are multiple aspects, and I think all of them are relevant. So on one side, once you have these AI systems that can ultimately mix and master, it takes kind of the what you call critical listening out of the equation, right? Like if you have this tool that can actually tune it to a specific whatever reference you have in mind, you don't actually have the critical listening in the loop from that perspective. And that definitely in the future affects the whole kind of how your headphones, should you care whether your headphones sound accurate or not, or your speakers for that matter. But that is already a point where the human is basically out of the loop. So technically you can do it. It definitely eventually will get you to the right sound much faster. However, as long as human is in the loop, it's a lot of like what the calibration of the monitoring devices brings you is just confidence, because you know that what you hear is like the real thing that is actually there. Because you as a human, unlike the AI that can listen to an audio interface output digitally, you actually can't do it as a human. So as long as humans are going to be in the loop, there is the confidence aspect, because now you get a situation where your AI says, hey, it's cool, and you listen to it and you definitely feel like it's not where you want it to be. So there you have a dilemma, right? Like what you call circle of confusion. Should you go out and change something? And why should there be human in the loop if you listen to the content in order to make some kind of decisions about what changes that you want to make? Then you have to have some confidence in whether what you hear is right or wrong. So I think in the very long run, definitely AI tools that just get you there in one go will decrease the need of like calibrated devices. On the other hand, calibrating the devices will become much more convenient. So as you made the example of, we now do lots and lots of integrations with hardware devices where the calibration just sits in the hardware device, which makes it extremely convenient. Strategically, we are absolutely doubling down on that. There are now, I think altogether like 14 integrated products in the market. There are many more to come. We are now having probably like 5 or 6 more integrations already in the pipeline. They are gonna be coming out over this year and the next year. Getting your devices calibrated ultimately is going to become cheaper and more convenient than it is now. And then I think as long as a human is going to be in the loop, you will still want that confidence, because not having the confidence ultimately is bad for your efficiency, because you get this confusion, like whether it's right or wrong, whether you need to change something or not. Ultimately, you as a critical listener, you listen because you want to make decisions. These decisions can be you go manually and change something. These decisions can be you give different instruction to AI. But while you are still in the loop making those decisions, you need the confidence. So I think that is a factor that is gonna still like, we're still gonna have like calibrated devices for some time, because acoustically you just can't build a perfect speaker and perfect headphones, so you have to deal with that sort of calibrating them. So I think we are, as a company, we are relatively confident that we'll still probably be doing this for some 10 years to come. It's not like we think that in 2-3 years calibration is gonna be gone. You will still want to have the confidence in what you hear.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense because I might think something sounds great when somebody else thinks it's garbage. And so there's always that subjectivity of music in general, right? And same thing for mixing, for acoustics, all the things.
Yeah. And yeah, my main point, and it's all about decision making. So how do you know when you need to change something in the prompt for AI, or you need to change something manually, or whatever that you do? How do you know that you have to do it? Because you can only rely on your ears, right, when making decisions about sound.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize this until yesterday. I was looking on the Sonarworks site and I realized that you guys have special reference technology for even people who are hearing impaired. For example, I know somebody who's deaf in their left ear, so you can actually calibrate for that specific use case, which I think is really cool.
And the other aspect, which is actually a growing segment for us, is multi-channel sound. Like whenever you and that's a different topic. So I don't know how deep you want to go into to this. Basically, all the object-based audio initiatives that have been around, like Dolby Atmos, of course, the biggest player on the block. So the aspect with those is that sound-wise, it's very difficult to get it sound right, just like by making a studio or putting on headphones. If you have any, like, the way to think about it, if you have any acoustical issue, whatever, headphone or speaker wise, in 2 channels, if you multiply it by whatever channels you have, let's say 20, you just multiply the problem. Like whenever you have some misalignment between, let's say, speakers, and once you up the gain to like 20 speakers, it's gonna be, and if you don't align them perfectly, it's gonna be a really big mess. And it's very difficult to work in such environments. Like, I have been doing this, technically calibrating studios, even manually. I've spent probably so many hours with a mic in my hand, just calibrating all kinds of really weird setups that we meet in these high-end studios. Like, I have the ability to do it myself, but I would never do it manually because it just takes so much time. Like, to properly manually calibrate, let's say, a full Atmos setup probably takes a few days, like, to fully fine-tune it. And then when you actually know that you can do it within less than an hour using an automated technology, and it works ultimately better than I can do manually, then it's super difficult to go back to manual. So that's another aspect. I don't think that the object-based audio ultimately goes away. I think it's here to stay. And I think that, and I would say that it's kind of stagnating at this point, simply because I think the biggest reason for those formats to stagnate is because there is not enough money flowing that way in terms of like paying extra to producers making that object-based formats. But I think AI can actually alter that game. AI can enable making those types of recordings actually more efficient, and that can be a big boost for those formats. But ultimately, I don't think that the formats are going to go away, because if you think about it, object-based audio is kind of the most natural format, because if you go out in the real life, everything is object-based. Like when you go think of it, if you go in a forest, and we started with talking about birds, and you see a bird singing somewhere on the tree, it's actually object-based audio, right? The object is bird, and it sings from a very specific place. All the other formats that we have, like stereo, for instance, they're actually kind of completely virtual formats. They don't exist in the nature. You don't get an image of where the bird is singing by 2 birds singing with a slight delay to each other, right? That's not how sounds get placed in the nature. So nature is actually object-based audio. And I do believe that that factor alone means that these formats are going to stay because they're actually the most natural formats. They're still complex. It's still difficult to work in those formats. I do believe AI is going to improve that, and we'll have more of that. And yeah, as I said, working with these multi-channel formats, you actually need automated systems. It's a nightmare doing them manually.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good thought. I guess in that context, what would you say to somebody, let's say they have a home studio in their basement and they want to invest in improving the acoustics? Where is the balance in your mind, or what advice would you give to them as far as investing in some acoustic treatment versus relying on calibrated speakers, saying using Sonarworks or some similar technology? Because if you're in a metal box, even if you calibrate your speakers, you're still probably going to experience some issues. So where is that fine line between the two of investing in the acoustic build out of the room versus calibrating the speakers to sound good in that room?
I mean, sounds simple, but it's actually a very complex answer because it really depends on a lot of factors. So first off, a lot and more of production is happening on headphones. That's a different factor because headphones are not affected by the environment in which you are. So that technology has developed very, very rapidly over the let's say last 10 years. I mean, just look back 20 years back, like headphones was not even a use case. Like, I mean, absolutely tiny use case. And now they are everywhere. So
Yeah.
that development has been very, very rapid. I don't think that that's going to go away simply because of convenience, because you get rid of all these other aspects that you just talked about simply by using headphones. And I think they're actually getting reliable enough to actually make good recordings using headphones. We had this like a very interesting case in the COVID time where we had one of the Grammy awarded engineers. He's one of the kind of main engineers that works for a Sony label. And he was all like speaker person. He only worked with speakers and he got calibrated speakers and he really liked that. And then as the COVID came, he got locked out of his studio. And then he had a really interesting case where like he has worked all his life in the studio, like he knows the sound and he knows how to work in his specific studio, and then he was locked out of it. And then he seriously tried headphones. And then he said that actually calibrating the headphones like saved his career, basically. He even got a Grammy for a recording he did on calibrated headphones because like with calibrated headphones, he could actually sort of have the mental image of like how it was working in the studio. So that's one part of the answer is I think headphone, they are already really good. They are ready for primary use as a sort of production tool. And I think they're still going to get better. I can't reveal it fully. We have a massive update coming in the headphone product line that's gonna deliver you basically exactly your studio speaker feel on headphones, and it's gonna be at a ridiculous level of accuracy. Like ridiculous is when we have been doing these like testing and demoing the product right now, we had numerous cases where like an engineer basically can't differentiate whether he's sitting on with headphones or listening to speakers. And then we are doing the demo and switching the setups back and forth, and he's listening on headphones. We have switched from speakers to headphones, and he's saying, "Hey, can you now switch the headphones on?" Because he's actually thinking that he's still listening to the speakers. So basically, the technology is getting to the level where, and I have experienced that. So I would say and this is coming out still this year. So with that, the line between a headphone and a speaker is going to become more and more blurred. So I think when we project out in the future, I think the headphone use case is just going to still continue growing because of convenience. Then on the speaker side, so coming back to your question, where to invest. So that's I think first. If you look at somebody who wants a simple setup, doesn't have a huge budget, I mean, now is, and I would be starting my career now, I would probably start leaning on headphones because that's somewhat kind of future proof for you. It's not going to get worse. It's only going to get better from where we are right now. And then in terms of if you do go speakers, I would kind of say split it 50-50. Like if you have a budget, invest half of it in your speaker setup, invest half of it in acoustic panels. And there we will also actually put out a new product, most probably 2026, as a next iteration of our current product is we'll be able to give you a guide in terms of what to do with acoustics as well, not just like calibrating the speaker, but also understanding your room acoustics and advising you of what to do in the like with the acoustics. But as a rule of thumb, I would probably split the budget in half and kind of invest half in speaker and half in treatment.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I mean, I'd say in the last 5 to 10 years since I've been like more intensely working with music and audio and mixing and mastering, I've always heard invest more into the acoustic treatment. But I think I would agree with you now because calibration is getting much better than it has been in the last couple of years. And it really probably does help you tune it to the room as long as you've got some kind of acoustic.
But that said, we are bringing out acoustics focused product as well, because we do believe that acoustics, as long as you will want to have speaker sound in your room, acoustics is still going to matter. I mean, there's no AI software that ultimately is going to solve your acoustic problem. So that's why we will be focusing on that area as well. So I even though we are primarily a calibration company, I don't want to shy away from the fact that, hey, acoustics is still important, and it's going to be still important in 3 years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my only reservation with the headphone thing is that you don't actually feel sub frequencies in headphones. So the headphones are awesome for mid range and high end and even low mids, but I think there is something to be said about things under 200 hertz that can really get lost.
And this unfortunately, I can't tell everything about this new product, so just wait. It's actually we are planning to release it like end of Q, so it's basically like it's very near to the launch, and like the feedbacks we've gotten are just amazing. So I think it actually addresses that problem as well, because literally many people just can't differentiate it anymore. Like literally they get completely confused whether they're listening speaker or headphone. Now, the other aspect of that is, and I don't know where you are on that front, there is an aspect which is like you get a kick in your stomach, and that just headphone can't produce. But then I would like, if you are that I need to get a kick in my stomach, I would probably say that you are working at too loud of volume levels. Yeah. Normally you shouldn't be like mixing, mastering at that kind of volume levels.
True.
I mean, in the long run, that's definitely hearing damaging volume levels. So of course, I have to admit, like no amount of headphone and technology is gonna give you a kick in the stomach, but I kind of reserve the kick in the stomach for other than kind of professional production use cases, because to me that's a little bit too loud.
Yeah, I have a sub pack on my floor that I put my feet on. And that really helped with my headphones. That is actually one of my favorite mixing.
That would be my other suggestion. Yes, there are sort of these tactile devices that actually produce the vibrations, so that can actually help. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that setup with my headphones. Do you know of another company as an alternative to Subpack? I know there's been very significant supply chain issues for them, and I don't know if they're actually still selling them. It's been years from what I know.
No, I actually haven't followed this field very closely now, so no, sorry. I remember we actually did a project with Subpack, so I know that company, but I don't know actually any other.
But I feel like that is a huge market that could really take over.
Yeah, and I think as the headphone use cases proliferate even further, that's going to be a boost to all these sort of other vibration devices.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about some AI things and what your thoughts are. That I mean, we mentioned briefly you have the new Sound ID vocal AI product, and you said that you're going to invest more into AI tools in the future as well. What type of AI tools do you believe are most valuable for music creators today?
Well, first off, we focused on voice because we felt like that is the biggest use case. Like if you take a step back and look at all the components that you need to make music, vocals is the biggest and the most complex one. And probably, I mean, also on the listener side, that's probably the one that is the most important to get right, right? Most listeners are actually focused on vocals. Probably weird, but for me personally, I actually pay more attention to all the rest of the stuff than vocals. For me, like as a listener, vocals oddly actually come almost last. Like, I don't know, but I know that talking to people, I realize that that's kind of weird because most people actually focus in on vocals first. So that was the reason, like the use case was the reason why we chose voice. We will focus for time being in the short term, we will completely focus on the voice because I think the technology is still in its infancy and we still think that that's a super important factor. So we are going to absolutely kind of double down and focus on voice. Our roadmap for what we want to deliver in the voice product category, it's probably still for like 3 years to come. So in the short run, we're going to be completely focused on that. That said, I think there are like lots of other tools that are very important. Of course, like mixing, mastering tools are, I think, getting more reliable. Definitely like generative tools. I mean, they are getting seriously, frighteningly good. So those are, I think, very important for like songwriters or somebody that wants to generate ideas or actually is going for like directly generating content. But that's I think that's a sensitive debate there. Like, how do you use those kinds of tools? So, I mean, my general advice, actually, when I think about this in terms of like what tools should people be focusing in on using and learning, I would actually say that if you are in the like a music making business, you should absolutely focus on all of them. Like it's a completely radical kind of paradigm shift in how stuff is made. We currently don't know where exactly it's going to go. Like you don't know what kind of tools are ultimately going to be like the winners and what kind of impact they are going to be. One factor that is clear, the field is developing like extremely fast. Like as nothing has been developed as fast as these tools are developing. Even if you have tested something out, yesterday, it doesn't mean that the tool, and you, let's say you came to the conclusion that, it wasn't what you expected. So you kind of drop it and you ultimately run a risk of like, just missing out on when the tool actually got really good, and it can happen any moment. I would say my advice to people in the industry would be lean on absolutely all the tools, big and small. We are in this paradigm shift where things in the future are definitely not going to be the way they were in the past. So I would focus in on everything. My analogy would be, let's go back to the analog time, like let's say tape, right? And then you suddenly have these digital technologies appearing. And now the question would be, back in the day, so which of the digital tools you should be focusing on apart from like cutting tape? And my answer, like if I would go back in a time machine, I would be like, hey, absolutely lean in on the digital, because in the future, everything is going to be digital. There is no tool that you can actually like miss out. So, and I think it's the same situation with AI. It's kind of getting clear. The AI aspects are going to be almost everywhere. And I think, but it's not yet clear who the winners are or how good these tools are going to be. I mean, maybe you'll nobody knows where this glass ceiling is. We don't see it at the moment. Maybe they will be continuing the fast development and suddenly hitting some kind of ceiling and never getting like to the ultimately outcompeting humans. At least at this point, it doesn't seem that there is such a ceiling. So everything is just continuing. I think the safest bet is saying the future is going to be, a lot of it is going to be AI. So I would just lean on everything. And in the article that we published, I kind of told this story that played out in our office, where one of our investors sent us a link to like earlier version of one of the generators. And I listened to it, and my feedback to this investor was like, hey, it's cool. Like it is an experiment, completely unusable in a professional use case because it produces lots of artifacts. It was really, really crappy output. And then at one point they released the next version, and it just like it got good. It got really, really good. And then it took another version, and it got to the point where most people actually can't differentiate it anymore from like human-made stuff.
Yeah.
If I would back then completely kind of put it under the rug and say, okay, this is crap, this won't work, and like whatever, forget about it, I would have completely missed out on that development. But I did kind of, because professionally we were testing everything out, so I did kept kind of following on how these tools are developing, and it was crappy one day, and then there was a release of a new version, and it got really, really good, 100x improvement over just one release. So I think it's extremely important to get involved with all of these tools and actually make it a habit of just experimenting with them. Even if one of those tools feels like it's not yet there, as much as you can. Of course, you can't do that if you have like a commercial project and you have a deadline and you just have to rely on what what works. But then I think in these days, you definitely have to have a time for experiments. And then you have to continue experimenting, even when the stuff that seems like subpar to what you want it to be, because at one point you might learn to use the tool right, and at one point it might get much better as a technology tool. So from all of this, I can't take any one tool out of this whole mix and say, okay, like you definitely have to use these tools. I would say we are still at the early stage. You have to definitely lean into a lot of experiments. And that's important for a lot of reasons. So I think, my main advice would be continue experimenting with absolutely everything you can get your hands on. Make it a prerequisite, like just make it a priority that like to lean in and experiment with these tools. I mean, if you would be if you would time travel back in the day of tape, and you would get it all started with Pro Tools, right? Like releasing a DAW, and you would be back in the days, like, would you start leaning in and knowing what it is today? And I probably think the answer is yes. Like you would have a really hard argument saying stay on the tape, right?
Yeah, that's true. Another example of like technology that was laughed at was Netflix, right? I mean, Netflix went to Blockbuster to do a deal. Blockbuster laughed at them and they said this will never take off. And then Blockbuster went bankrupt in like, I think 2010, and Netflix became like $200 billion net worth. So like, I think that if you're not looking at technology and trying to find ways that it can work for you and testing different ideas, like, you're going to miss out, especially in the world of AI. I played with Suno, you're probably familiar with. I played with Suno probably, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And it was garbage. It wasn't good at all. It was just sounded terrible. It was like that artifact kind of sound you mentioned. And then I literally played with it last night, and I uploaded one of my own songs I'm working on as a reference, and it was incredible. I was like, this is something I would want to make. And it sounded clean. The mix was really clean. So, it's moving really fast, like you said. And I think that's good advice. Like, find the tools that work for you. I don't have an extensive amount of experience, like producing vocals. I've done it, but that's not my sweet spot. And if I could find something that can get me there faster, then like I'm all about using it to my advantage. And I think people are going to fall behind if they don't start to use some of these tools to their advantage, because other people are going to be able to create much more high quality content much faster. So I think that's good advice for sure. In regards to your product specifically, the new voice AI, there's a lot of people entering this market as far as AI vocals. I could list probably 5 or 6 other tools that do something similar. What is going to make what you're doing with voice AI stand out, or like how are you going to have some kind of unique advantage, I guess, in that market? Because it's going to be very saturated in the next year or two, I think.
Well, first of all, there's a whole roadmap of features, but if I kind of look at a higher level, we are completely committed to focusing on this one. So the same stuff is happening in all of the areas. Like there's going to be lots more players in almost any tool category you can name, simply because the world is turning that way. So, and our first thing is that we're not going to run in all directions. We're going to completely razor sharp focus on the voice functionality. Within that voice functionality, actually, if you look at everything that's in the market, a lot of those vocal tools come from simple kind of spoken voice. So you have like by far the majority of technologies being developed for spoken voice because it's a massive business use case, like with call centers and what have you. Like so there's lots of technologies there, and then people are discovering that like these technologies are getting so good that they actually start working for producing singing vocals with the same kind of technology, but it's been developed primarily with kind of speech first. And our focus is really razor sharp focus on singing vocals, and it brings in actually quite a lot of nuance into the whole mix. So that, and in addition, a lot of our primary focus, like through all these years, has been kind of workflow and the best possible user experience. So, and I think what I'm still seeing happening a lot is that there are a lot of these newcomers that maybe have some basic technology, but they are not focused. They don't understand fully the workflows and the UX that you have to bring to professionals. So that's going to be our key focus area, ultimately focusing on delivering the efficiency in the workflow that you need. The main thing that we want to achieve is that our tool is going to be by far the most convenient for you as a professional user.
Okay.
Like when it comes to vocals, a lot of aspect is currently it works through vocal libraries. So you have like each voice is like a voice in your library. So our goal within a year or so is getting to a place where you can literally get any vocal you can think of out of this one tool. So we are envisioning having one tool that will produce you like any vocal you can imagine. So it does start with massively increasing the vocal libraries, but then ultimately it gets to UX in terms of how do you work with that to create basically anything you would imagine.
See, that would be really nice because most vocal AI tools I played with now, they just have models, right? And those are just real people, most likely, that they just sampled or just made a model out of like who knows how many hundreds of hours of vocal recordings. So yeah, I mean, if you could have, theoretically a tool that could manipulate and create any vocal model style or genre that you wanted, that would be pretty incredible. And I'm not quite sure how you get there. But
so I just like we are working on that. I would put the time frame probably 1-2 years to get there, but that's the goal.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing more of that rolling out. How have you typically found these vocalists that are in the models right now? Are these people that you've reached out to, that you've just found online, or?
Like in all possible ways. Actually, there's now going to be massive increase in the library sizes. So we're going to bring out lots of new voices. Currently, yes, just individually reaching out to people, legally signing all the documents so that we actually, like all the vocals that we use we use them legally. So that's another aspect there, because I'm not sure that all the models that you kind of see out there are actually legal, and that's where it's not such a big deal. I guess in other use cases, I think it's actually a big deal in a professional music creating use case. So, but yes, it's reaching out to individuals, and then we have kind of currently optimized how we actually produce a model. So we legally sign up a singer, and then they have to sing a specific kind of set of vocals that they have to do for us to build the model. So, and we have optimized that. So it's now pretty streamlined. So now there's going to be a big and fast expansion in the vocals that we provide.
Is it in your vision where people could actually create a model of themselves and be able to?
That's in the pipeline. There are very specific use cases. There are at least two use cases there. One is that you create your own vocal, and that cannot be a real voice. Like, it can be a synthetic voice that you are creating as your unique vocal. So that's one use case. But there is actually a very important use case where you need to copy a vocal. And I'll just give you an example that I know. There is a couple, a wife and a husband, that do voices for one cartoon. Like, the cartoon has two characters, so they are both kind of doing those characters vocally. And then at some point, I think it was the wife that got like ill or something, and she now couldn't do those vocals for some time. And we actually built them, we replicated the wife's vocal so that the husband was actually doing both vocals for like a few of those series. Like, when his wife wasn't able to do it, he was actually doing both vocals, like the male and the female vocal, just using his voice. And that's actually, I mean, it's like kind of anecdotal use case, but this is actually a big use case. Or, have a long-standing series or shows, and suddenly somebody dies. So let's say as a cartoon character, so you can actually as long as you do it legally, in a legally sound way, that's an important use case, and you can continue using that voice. So that use case is actually very big. Or I would think probably business-wise, the biggest area in this is, let's say you have somebody who is sort of a celebrity character, like a very popular person doing some kind of shows. You are now at a place where you can replicate a video. So as long as you can replicate the voice as well, you can actually start like factory producing a lot of that content without that one person, without relying on that one person. And I'm absolutely sure that is going to happen, and it's actually going to be a big use case.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that looks like with podcasts, because I wouldn't have to show up to do all recordings. I could just have text, or just feed this giant script and just have it go and just upload it.
Yes. I think that's not a future scenario. I think we are about now, or we are about the place where that becomes possible. So I think we're going to see, I would bet even we will see the first instances of that even this year.
Yeah, I've considered using 11 Labs for that, because they're a pretty popular one for doing like spoken word modeling.
Yeah.
Pretty popular. And even rap vocals, I would love to see some more modeling with rap vocals as well, because that is a huge industry. Yeah. And I do a lot of sampling with that as well. And that's another thing too, is like people are constantly ripping and doing flips of vocals that they're getting off of YouTube or whatever, acapellas. And so there's always licensing issues and copyright issues with that. But I think we're going to probably see less of the legality problems because of these models coming out, where it's easier for people just to find good vocals to use. So that'll be interesting. I want to be respectful of your time. We've come up to the hour, and it went really fast. I really enjoyed just hanging out with you. One last question before we go, maybe two. What concerns should producers should have in terms of jobs that are going to be lost? I think that is a concern a lot of people have talked about. I think there's a lot of opportunities with AI. I also think there's concerns for real producers. Who in the music industry might be concerned with all this new technology?
I think honestly, in terms of concern, I think everybody should be concerned. Frankly, I'm the CEO of a company, and I should be getting concerned about CEO job, because I'm listening to all these talk about, investors starting companies without CEOs, because why do they need CEOs when you have massively potent AI that can actually ultimately get better in decision making than humans? So I think when we look at the AI era, I think in terms of concern, everybody should be concerned. I really the only people that maybe shouldn't be concerned are having a lot of physical power, I don't know, presidents of countries with large military. Probably they are kind of safe in the short run. I guess everybody else should be kind of in the concern category. Now, here is how I'm thinking about this. So what's gonna be affected first? And I think first, it's going to be everything generic. everything that you can put like that's generic, like describing that stuff, that's going to be first that's taken away. Whatever is your role, if you are doing generic stuff like elevator music, like, as an anecdotal, very primitive use case, but if you are producing elevator music in whatever you do for that, probably that's going to go away super fast. So, but like that's an anecdotal, simple kind of use case, but I would expand it. Of course, elevator music is not such a big industry, but then there's lots of other music used in generic ads, which is actually a much, much bigger use case now than elevator music. Very interestingly, since I'm following this area very closely, as of late, I am getting these ads sort of in the social media that are fully like, and I can now tell like whether it's human or AI generated, and there are more and more ads that I can clearly say it's like AI generated music. And the interesting touch that they are doing is they are generating this music with really complex lyrics. So basically, all the text that you want to have in your ad, they are putting in as a song with very, very sophisticated lyrics. And the way you can tell it's AI, it's actually too sophisticated. People normally don't make this sophisticated kind of lyrics for songs. They get like, philosophical and kind of very complex. But so my main thing is that if you're doing generic stuff, that's first to kind of get hit. Like you are a generic session musician without anything that really stands out. You are, producing generic stuff as a producer. So that's going to be the first one. And the counterpart of that is, so what do you do? Like, if you want to stay competitive and you want to still stay in the industry and still doing stuff, like, what do you do? My main advice would be very specific and unique. Like in this era where AI is going to take away all the generic stuff, you have to be unique and specific, and you will have to reinvent how specific and how unique you are at a ever increasing speed. It doesn't just mean, like there are many examples from the past where somebody as an individual has some specific stuff, like Michael Jackson had these, he invented moonwalk, right? Like very specific, unique moves that nobody did before. And then people just watch him do the moonwalk first and everybody goes like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible, right? So, and then kind of that's probably like, if you say Michael Jackson, like most people will remember him by the moonwalk, right? Like that was a very unique standout performance. And I think in this new era, you will have to reinvent these things over and over and over again at like ever increasing rapid pace. So as humans, to stay competitive, AI is going to challenge us. We will have to become unique and very specific, like all the time. So we have to learn to be unique. I think in the past, maybe even I would say probably the most of the business was actually generic. Like I think there is of course uniqueness, but if you look at the whole mass of the industry, it was probably very generic overall. Like most of the volume was in generic stuff, and I think that generic stuff is going to be taken away exactly because it's the biggest business value. So what's going to be left for humans is stay creative, stay unique, and stay specific. So that's I think in all of this, that's my main kind of advice on how to look at this. Like how to do it, like it will depend on like really individual cases, but that's what I would be focused on going forward. And I don't think it's not like the people in the music industry are somewhat unfortunate in this. I would probably say that music industry is gonna be hit the hardest and almost the first in terms of this mass disruption of how an industry works. It has this, music industry is unique in this. It always gets hit first and hardest. But then I don't think anybody else is safe. So it's not like you are in the music industry and you talk to your friends who are lawyers and you suddenly feel that you are unfortunate. I think The lawyers are will be just as much challenge as music creators. So yeah, but stay specific, stay unique.
No, I think that's great advice. I think we could probably end it there. I totally agree. We all just need to learn how to do the new moonwalk and pretty much just stay as original as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I do it over and over. Like this week you invented moonwalk, and then the week after that you invent the Mars walk.
Yeah.
And the question of who is going to be still in the industry are people who can do it. So it's, I mean, definitely somebody is going to be hurt and put out of business. And the ones that are going to survive are going to be those very creative people that the AI is then going to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, thanks for joining the podcast. Like I said, it's been over the hour. It's been really great hanging out and talking with you. I could keep going probably for another hour, but I'm sure you've got stuff to do. But thank you so much for joining the podcast, sharing all your thoughts and things. Any upcoming updates or projects or things you wanted to mention we haven't talked about before we go?
There's lots of stuff now coming out from Sonarworks, so I'm super pumped up about Q3. So lots of new releases coming from us. So if we'll do this interview again in half a year, we'll have lots of new stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Hey, I'm down. Let me know. But yeah, I'll include a link to the show notes. As always, everybody, if you want to go check out the links, Sonarworks and the voice AI and all the things. So I'll include that, and make sure you give Sonarworks a follow. Yeah. Thanks again for joining the podcast. Really appreciate your time. This has been really fun. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you don't hate me or the podcast, please leave a 5-star review. Hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening, and it would really help me out. If you want to be the first to get new episodes, updates on events, some free downloads and stuff, go to abletonpodcast.com and make sure you enter your email, subscribe to the newsletter. I'll do my best to send you cool stuff. Check back on Tuesdays for brand new episodes. Make sure you go follow this guest for spending their time and energy hanging out. If you have any ideas or strong opinions about the podcast, please let me know. Just shoot me a message. Go to abletonpodcast.com, scroll to the bottom, send me a little message, and I'm happy to make this the best I can for you guys. Much love for listening, and I will see you next time.